Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Meher Baba.
Many of you are unaware of the fact that my very first Savas, and I've been to umpteen, was the LA Savas. In 1978.
Wow.
And that was, I think it was in Pilgrim Pines then.
Yes, yeah.
And I was in San Francisco, and I think Alan Cohen was the chief speaker. And I had a severe back problem. I could barely stand. So I came to from San Francisco by train to Los Angeles. Michael Ramsden fixed my back. I gave a talk and I went back. And so it was my very first Savas, was the LA Savas. And Lois is right. This is like family. It's a Baba family, which is now, in the new life, is our family. We don't live with our parents or our brothers or sisters any longer. Who do we live with? We live with the Baba family. They are our brothers and sisters. They are our elder brothers and elder sisters. So you'll hear more about my journey during the new life, because my house, which is my home in Dehra Dun, 36 Little Road, was the headquarters of the new life in 4950. And my father was an integral part, and my mother, father and mother were an integral part of the new life. So I'll narrate that tomorrow at considerable length. But today, Lois asked me if there was something new I had to share. And I've been currently doing several projects at the same time. Actually, 3 books at the same time. The 3 books are, one is I've tentatively titled as The Godchild, which is from Meherwan to MeherBaba, and I'll give you a little preamble to that. Then I figured that a book that I did many years back, which was the first book I did after coming to the United States, was the ancient one with Dehra Dun, and that's out of print. So I figured that, so several people have mentioned to me that that book is like a Bible to them, since every story has a kind of a spiritual instruction at the end of it. So Pete Townsend, who had instructed Dara to record Erich, had hundreds and hundreds of tapes. And he donated all of them to Beloved Archives.
Wow.
So I had these all, some of them were transferred to MP3s, but I had a dilemma. If I was going to do this book by Erich with a spiritual instruction at the end of each story, I need to get it transcribed. So I mentioned it to Murshida Khanna, knowing that she had a large number of candidates who would be able to do it. So I asked her if she would get these tapes transcribed, and she thought I would ask for 10 or 15. I told her I needed 200 to 300 tapes transcribed. And she said, no problem, just send them to me. So now her students are transcribing those tapes.
Wow.
Whose tape?
Erich's tapes. Erich's tapes. These are very precious, very good spiritual instructions at the end of each story. Amazing tapes from the earliest days to he passed away. The third book, which I've been working on for ever, which is since Baba dropped his body in 1969, is a book on MeherBaba and Gandhi. Now, it took me many years to collect a tremendous amount of material. I went to Delhi, I went to London, I did research with Gandhi scholars. Fortunately, I had all the correspondence that was exchanged between Baba and Gandhi. So this year I've decided that once I finish what I'm doing is I'll take this up seriously and get the book completed. The title is Freedom in Silence. That's the title of the Gandhi book. And the subtitle is, which might raise a few eyebrows in Delhi, is how Meher Baba led Gandhi's steps to freedom of India. And that might put me a little bit of jeopardy, but to put it mildly. But I'm determined to do it. I have all the material. All I have to do is write it. So that's the rub. It's because I have close to 8,000 to 9,000 pages of material, and I have to bring it down to a readable size. Baba never ceases to surprise me, particularly where it comes to archival material. In 2016, when I was in India, 2 manuscripts, diaries turned up, never used before, both in English, and at the same time, a handwritten manuscript turned up. Now, I'll give you a little background to these manuscripts. Bailey Irani is the only disciple, well, you can call him a disciple, or companion of Meher Baba, who was born a few days after Baba was born, in the same hospital, he claims in the same bed, and under the same doctor. So he left behind a very large collection of material on his early years with Meher Baba, which is Meher Baba is Mehran. He was the only companion of Meher Baba in the early years, the only companion. So he wrote a diary, which in 2016 was in 1928, that nobody knew that he had written one in English. And then there was one which was written later by Ramju Abdullah, which is also a diary of Mehran in the early years, who was a companion of Meher Baba around the same period, but a little later. Then he had a very, very stormy relationship with Meher Baba, Bailey Irani. It was a love-hate, more hate relationship with Meher Baba. It's Mehran. He was arrogant, he was headstrong, he was an angry man. He couldn't accept Meher Baba the way he claimed. He came close to Baba, he went away from Baba, he got into trouble. Baba once said that there were 2 snakes on his shoulders. One was Bailey, and the other was his mother. But he said it jocularly, but Bailey was sitting there and he knew what Baba meant. So he would always call himself, he said, Baba is God, but I am the Satan. So this is a little preamble. So he then drifted away from Baba for some time and landed up in a nursing home in Hyderabad, where he was there for a long time. Dr. Hoshin Bharucha, who many of you have heard of, he was from Navsari, visited him in Hyderabad during one of his lecture tours and took all his notebooks. So he took his notebooks 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now notebook number 2 could not be found. Somebody had taken it from him or had given it to somebody, but it had a very strange life because nobody knew where volume 2 was. So somebody translated 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 into English, and a number of people had it. And so in 2016, a Baba lover called me up while I was in Hyderabad and said that they have found volume 2, but they didn't know how to translate this because it was in very old Gujarati. So I said, why don't you send it to me? I'll have a look. Not that I know a word of Gujarati. I know colloquial Gujarati, but not the reading Gujarati. And this was, it's like Farsi. You know, there are different dialects and different, or like any other language. You have several different dialects and the old and the new and so forth. So this manuscript came to me, and I was sitting in the retreat dining room, and I showed it to my wife, and I said, do you think you can read any of this? Because my wife can read Gujarati. She said, not a word. So I said, oh dear, what do we do now? So two Gujarati ladies walk into the dining room. One was older, one was younger. So Mark said, why don't you ask them? They might know. If they don't know, somebody might know. So I take the manuscript to this lady and I tell her that, you know, I have this manuscript and it needs to be translated into English. Can you or do you know of anyone who can do it? So they looked at it and said, it's simple, it's old Gujarati, but you can read it. So, and then they looked at each other, the mother and the daughter. And then the younger lady turns to me and says, you know, our driver is waiting outside to take us back to Bombay. So I said, do you think I can give this manuscript to you and you can translate it in English? She said, not really, my English is not that strong. But I can read it in Gujarati. And I said, I can understand Gujarati, but it's not. So I said, oh well, you know, I'll look for somebody in Pune or in Bombay to translate this. A few minutes later, the mother and daughter talk to each other, and the younger lady comes to me and says, we've arranged for our driver to stay overnight at the retreat, not the retreat, but this guest house here. And I want to start. This is an opportunity that Baba has sent. I will not miss it for the world. So I said, so let's start right away. So we started. We worked on it till 11 o'clock, till they warned us to go to bed. It was a very long manuscript. So next day she said, you know what, I've asked the driver to stay on. We continue it for the next day, and the second day it didn't complete. 70 hours straight we worked on the manuscript. And we completed the manuscript. And so when Lois said, is there anything new you can share with us? I figured that what I'm going to read to you now has never been heard before. And that you'll be hearing it for the first time. And soon after, if you could all switch off your cell phones, please. Soon after, I did more research and more research. I found a diary written by Mani of her early years, part of which I'll share on Sunday because it relates to Iran, about why her mother Dehra Dun came to Pune and what precipitated that move. Things like that. So now we have about 250 pages of the manuscript, but it's still in progress.
Naosherwan, is this Bailey?
Yes.
Who ended up in Aden as a Navy man?
Yes, so part of it is that part of the story.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you may have heard of it or read it, or so some people have these notebooks have been circulated over a period of time in bits and pieces, and some people have read it. Bhauji used it quite a bit in Lord Mayor also, but he didn't have these two diaries, so that's what we've incorporated in this. So the story goes that Baba and Bailey, who were absolutely very, very close to each other, and eventually, what hasn't been talked about as much is Baba's Jhopri days, which is 1921 in Ferguson. And that's the time when Bailey and Baba stayed together in this chopri on Ferguson Road in Pune. So that's going to be a part of this book. So I'll read this. Meherwan always looked up to women with great respect and considered them as his mother or sister, and he would never tolerate any loose language concerning them. From a very young age, we companions knew well about this trait. Even those who came into his casual contact realized this. That is why one day, a middle-aged Irani was determined to test Meherwan, and if possible, force him to have a physical relationship with a woman. This Irani was popularly known as Kabuli. The word means from Kabul, but he may have originated or have come from Kabul, but he was generally known as Kabuli. He was one of the prominent ruffians in the locality of Pune cantonment. To have illicit relations with women seemed as though it was his birthright. Foul language was his main language. Apart from the few hours that he spent sleeping, he would remain intoxicated with liquor or toddy during his waking hours. Fighting, hooliganism seemed to be the sole purpose of his life. The police department was also fed up of it. One morning, around 11 o'clock, engrossed in chatting and walking leisurely, we passed through a known area in Pune populated by Parsis. As luck would have it, just as we passed by the house of this Kabuli and were proceeding onwards, he saw us from his home and quickly coming to the door called out Meherwan's name. We stopped. He invited Meherwan into his home, but Meherwan excused himself, saying he was very busy and assured him that he would visit him sometime later. The man, however, insisted that Meherwan come inside for 5 minutes and listen to what he had to say. Kabuli was completely drunk at that time. Meherwan felt helpless and proceeded towards the door, and standing outside asked Kabuli to quickly convey what he had to say. But Kabuli insisted that Meherwan came inside his home. Although sensing that all his efforts to convince Kabuli in this drunken state would be futile, Meherwan repeated, "I will return and meet you in just about half an hour. Wait till then. Right now I have to leave." Saying this, he started walking away briskly. I too ran after Meherwan and assumed that we had escaped this evil man. Just as we turned, we saw Kabuli running and staggering very close to us. Meherwan tried to run, but before he could do that, he was caught between two one-horse-driven tongas coming from the opposite direction. Avoiding being caught up between them, he tried to return quickly onto the road, but was caught by the Kabuli who was standing in front of him. As the lane was very narrow and the tongas were very close, Meherwan did not get a chance to run and got trapped. Kabuli caught him by the hand and took him home. Meherwan did not make any attempt to escape, for he knew that that would be foolish, knowing the type of bully Kabuli was. So instead, he now tried to tempt him, telling Kabuli that if he lets him go, he would offer him a gift of 6 bottles of toddy, and over and above give him 8 annas. But all this proved futile. Kabuli was heavily drunk and was not in a proper state of mind and was irritated with Meherwan's behavior. In that state of mind, staggering here and there, he at last dragged Meherwan to his home and ordered me not to enter his home and go away from there. As for Kabuli's orders, I left, but waited for Meherwan a little distance away in the neighborhood. I was deep in thought as to what step I should take. If I were to run to Sheriar's study shop and inform him about this whole episode, and if Sheriar were to immediately rush to Meherban's assistance, I was sure Kabuli would not spare me. He would never have allowed me to go scot-free, and therefore that course of action was not safe for me. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion that I should wait there for some more time. It was likely that Kabuli may have taken Meherban home for some confidential financial help, and after the discussion, Meherban would be allowed to go. Whatever it was, I must exercise patience, and so I waited. 5, 10, 15 minutes, and I stood up. I could not be patient any longer without informing Sheriar. Sheriar is Meherban's father. I took a few steps, and before proceeding, I gave one last glance at Kabuli's home and was overjoyed to see Meherban walking briskly towards me. When he came very close to me, he said, "Lady, hasten your steps. Parvardigar has saved me today." I quietly followed him and reached the toddy shop. On the way, when I glanced at Meherban's face, he looked pale. But the moment he entered the shop and met his father, colour returned to his face and a kind of secret joy radiated. I was expecting Meherban to complain about Kabuli to his father, but he kept quiet as though nothing had happened. Soon Sheriarji left for home after handing over the charge of the shop to Meherban. It was only then that Meherban told me what had happened. After Kabuli dragged Meherban to his home, he was very firmly and forcefully told to have a physical relationship with a cheap type of prostitute who was in the adjoining room, and if he did not do that, he would not be allowed to leave the place or even kill both of them. Dragging Meherban to the room, Kabuli opened the door and sternly warned the prostitute, who was waiting to come out of the room only after she had had sex with Meherban. Saying this, he pushed Meherban into the room and left the place. Fortunately, this dark, dungeon-like, broken-down room had no locking device, either from the inside or from the outside. Leaning against the door, Meherban gazed at the prostitute's face with a calm mind. No sooner did the prostitute come closer to Meherban to seduce him, with a smiling face, he fell on his knees and, placing his head at her feet, spoke in Marathi to her. "Mother, I am your son. Whatever you may do with others, but to me, you are like my mother. Protect me and help this poor, helpless child of yours and save me. It is the duty of every mother to help her child. At this time, perform this duty of yours, for which I shall ever be grateful to you." Even though she was a prostitute, she had the tender heart of a woman. Although she was in a cheap profession, karmically she was kind-hearted. Asking Meherban to wait there, she went to the front room. Returning from there quickly, she asked Meherban to follow her. Accordingly, Meherban followed her light-footed, and when they came to the front room, he saw Kabuli lying on the huge bed with both hands and legs outstretched, snoring in deep sleep. The lady stood at Kabuli's bed and with a smile signaled Meherban to leave quietly. Meherban thanked God with all his heart, and joining both his hands, lifting it to his forehead, he did a final namaskar to this woman. Meherban left the place very cautiously, and heaving a deep sigh of relief, came and met me. Meherban had strongly warned me not to disclose this to anyone. Next day, in the evening, Kabuli visited the toddy shop. Shehryar was not present in the shop at that time, but Meherban was there. Seeing Meherban, Kabuli folded both his hands in greeting. It would not be wrong to assume that the kind of respect Kabuli paid to Meherban on this occasion may be the first time in his life that he respected anyone. Meherban too returned his greeting. After that, leaning against the wooden crates nearby where Meherban was sitting and where bottles were stacked, Kabuli started talking. Although at this time he too was drunk, he was in his senses. He expressed regrets over yesterday's incident and even sought pardon. He confessed honestly that in order to test Meherban, he had devised this plot. And now he knew that Meherban had passed the test. He assured Meherban that he would never do such a thing in his life. Finally, before leaving, he said, Meherban, from today onwards, you are my father and I have become your son. I will not simply address you as my father, but will also discharge my duties as a loyal son. You will experience this yourself. Saying this, he clasped and took Meherban's hand in both his hands and said, Praise be to your Creator, honor be to your parents, and admiration to yourself. Although Meherban insisted that he drink toddy and leave, Kabuli quietly left. After that day, whenever and wherever Kabuli met Meherban, and whatever condition he may be in, he would always fold both hands and greet him first. On every occasion, he would address Meherban as my father. Not only that, but whenever Meherban was present in the shop, he would never consume toddy in his presence. Similarly, he would not create a ruckus or quarrel, and if it happened and Meherban were to pass by, he would at once stop and command his other companions too to stop. The manner in which Kabuli expressed respect for Meherban astonished everyone to such an extent that the matter could not be concealed from Meherban's father Shehryar, who told Shireen. Meherban told his mother that if an individual has a strong will, one can accomplish anything. Indeed, Kabuli's example proved it. So every avatar goes through a test of one kind or the other. And reading about MeherBaba's life, I have not come across a test like this that he had to encounter. So this was a pretty interesting example. So as we go along the story with Bailey, towards the end of this book, just before Meherban leaves for Manzil-e-Neem with his band of followers, and I'm now going all the way to the end of the book. Baba left Pune in the middle of the night to start his walk to Bombay. This was in 1922. And everybody had been sworn to secrecy. Everybody had been told that they were going to Bombay, but they didn't know when or what or anything. And Bailey was also going to Bombay. So somehow or the other, I think Bailey was going over to his mother's house to pick up a lantern or something. His mother sensed that Meherban and Bailey were going somewhere. So she sneaked out of the house and ran to see where he was going, and she met Meherban. And Meherban was in an awful hurry to leave with the scoop of his closed ones. And she came to him and said that, I'm leaving Bailey in your hands. You know him. He's arrogant. He's headstrong. He's a difficult boy. Please take care of him. Please take care of him. So Baba puts his hand in his mother's hand, embraces her and says, Bailey is my responsibility. I will always take care of her. So even there were times when he drifted, and there's a lot of stories where he was angry at Baba, he would run away and Baba would send somebody after him, he would come back, and Baba always kept his nazar on Bailey. Whatever his shortcomings were, and the shortcomings were many. So, I'll read another couple of stories. I know it's a little tedious to listen to stories as well.
Oh, great story!
So, in the year 1914, during World War I, a year after Meherban met Babajan, Bailey joined the field service in the capacity of first-grade storekeeper. Not many of you would know, and these diaries reveal it, that Meher Baba had signed for the Navy, to join the Navy. And it was only when his mother found out, his mother and father, that they persuaded him, and that he pulled back from. But Bailey had influenced him to join the Navy, because Bailey was in the Navy. So, Bailey joined the field service in the capacity of a first-grade storekeeper. Meherban was unaware of this, because at that time Bailey was working in an Irani hotel in Bombay and did not have any communication with Meherban. Bailey resigned from the job and, without informing anyone at home, joined the service on the hospital ship Syria. That was the name of the ship. I googled Syria and you can see pictures of this boat. In the very first voyage, they were given orders to reach Southampton in England. Bailey spent 2 years in service on this steamer. During this period, he sailed to various ports, visited far-off places, and experienced sorrowful wartime experiences. Finally, being tired of sea voyage, he applied for a transfer to land duty, which was accepted. Before he could report on this new assignment, he applied for leave for 1 month. And when he was sanctioned, he came to Pune. Since his steamer Syria was making to and fro trips only between Basra and Bombay, he got bored. During such routine trips between Basra and Bombay, he would regularly take the opportunity to come to Pune, either for a day or night, and meet Meherban. At this time, Meherban was in full consciousness. He had achieved the highest state of consciousness through just one embrace from Babajan. This is Bailey writing. This Bailey did not know at that time. Also, he did not believe in matters concerning sadhus, saints, nor had a basic knowledge or recognition of them. On the contrary, if ever Meherban would broach any topic concerning saints, he would make fun of him and ask him not to talk about such useless philosophies. They were friends. And it is for this reason that when Meherban would visit living Indian saints, walis, for their darshan, he would prefer to take along Khodu, who was another companion of Baba, instead of Bailey. During the period of Bailey's 1 month's leave in Pune, Bailey felt a transformation in Meherban's attitude. The old, in inverted commas, Meherban was no more. And he felt that he was in the company of a new Meherban. And when you read the lives of, say, Abdul Ghani Monsif, or they were all friends, they were schoolmates. So it was very, very difficult for a number of them to see that recognition of him as the Anzar. And particularly Munsif, when you read about particular stories in the New Life, you will see that he rebelled against this feeling of this. Bailey told Meherban that whatever he said was quite true, but he was not willing to let go. No, sorry. As days went by, Bailey became more and more aware of Meherban's detachment and aloofness. The time for preparing for departure came nearer. Bailey was on the waiting list, awaiting orders. When and where the need arose on the field for appointment of storekeepers, agents or workers, one by one, those on the waiting list had to depart to those places. In that manner, his name also came up after waiting for about a week. He received his service order to report for duty on the destroyer HMS Gurkha. So Syria was the old story, Gurkha was the new steamer he was on. The vessel had already docked at Bombay port, but was not known through the field order when she would be sailing. In spite of this uncertainty, it was expected to leave Bombay that very night. But Bailey could not do so because on receiving his reporting orders at home by hand delivery, he ran to meet Meherban at home. Fortunately, Bailey saw Meherban coming towards him from the opposite direction. Bailey gave the order in his hand and expressed a desire to leave that same night. During this, Meherban became sad and said, Bailey, it is in your hands to cancel this order. You had made a request application to be transferred from hospital ship duty to land duty. And it was also accepted by them. Still, they want to put you on this vessel. You have a right to draw their attention to this and ask them to withdraw this order and send someone else in your place. They will have to accept it. Let us see the result of this and meet me at this place at 2 o'clock sharp in the afternoon. As we hear Meherban's evolution from Meherban to MeherBaba, we see recognition of his spiritual growth. And as you see instances of how he evolved spiritually. He was evolved spiritually after the case, but this is in more tangible terms. Bailey told Meherban that whatever he said was quite true, but he was not willing to let go of this prestigious offer of being the storekeeper on the Gurkha, which was one of Britain's largest ships. Gurkha was famous for handling 800 to 1,000 patients. It had all the latest conveniences and gadgets, and the staff was well respected. She had 4 storekeepers and an equal number of helpers, 6 workers, etc. Besides, this boat had all the comforts and a variety of good, tasty food, fun and games. Bailey considered his good fortune to get the posting on this big and famous ship with all these luxuries and amenities. Bailey told Meherban, if I let go of this opportunity, it would be like the famous saying, when your goddess arrives to bless you by putting vermilion on your forehead, you rush off to wash your face, meaning losing out on a good opportunity. Meherban paid no attention to what he said and simply asked him to follow his orders, as that only would prove beneficial to him. After arguing with him for a long time, Bailey finally bowed to his wishes. He immediately met the Major and got his orders cancelled, then and there. He returned to inform Meherban how easily this was accomplished. Although Bailey felt that he had lost a good opportunity, he felt extremely happy to spend a few additional days at Pune with Meherban till a fresh order was received. Bailey writes, most importantly on this issue, I do not want to miss out writing that on the day this famous ship Gurkha left the shores of Bombay, throwing out loads of smoke while sailing smoothly forward, she struck a sea mine a few miles away and was shattered into pieces while she sank gradually into the sea. Several people died while a few fortunate ones were saved. Had I not listened to Meherban and obeyed his advice, I would have surely succumbed to my untimely death and would not have been alive to narrate this unfortunate tale. So these were glimpses that were Meherwan, as we go through Meherwan's life as a young man, glimpses of his spiritual nature. The second trip, he was then called on duty to Zanzibar in Africa, and Meherwan advised him to cancel that as well. And then he cancelled it because he had heard that there was some kind of an epidemic of mosquitoes, bitten by mosquitoes, and several diseases were rampant in that area of Zanzibar. So he went back to his commanding officer and asked to be relieved. Then the third call came was to Aden, which is in Yemen today. Again, Meherwan insisted that he cancel this. The date fixed for his departure for duty was December 25th, Christmas Day. As per the British custom, as a Christmas present, Bailey took a cake, a bottle each of port wine, brandy, whiskey, along with a fruit basket and a cash gift to hand deliver to the major at his bungalow. Obviously, he was trying to bribe him to relieve him from this. Only after giving him all these gifts did Bailey put forth his request to cancel the order. Despite all his attempts to convince the officer, he emphatically informed Bailey that this last order would have to be honoured because he was the only person in the first grade who was on the list, whereas all the others were on the second grade. Besides this, he was the only one on the list who had had the order cancelled twice in the last 1 month, and so there was nothing more that he could be done. The major indicated to Bailey in no uncertain terms that he had to perform his duties and that there was no other alternative for him but to take on this assignment. Upasni Maharaj's biography called Sakori Na Sadguru, the Sadguru of Sakori in Gujarati. And for a man like Bailey, it was like impossible. Baba had him do that. Of course, it was edited and corrected, but it was impossible. But he had him do it. And Baba at that time was speaking, and he told him Upasni Maharaj's life. And he wrote it day and night in the chopri.
Is this reading accurate to how he wrote it, or has it?
No, I'm trying to keep his language as much as I can. Of course, the translations are mine, but I'm trying to keep it as close to the way, like for example, this sentence that says, if I let go of this opportunity, it was like that famous saying, when the goddess arrives to bless you, by putting vermilion on your forehead, you rush off to wash your face. This is a Gujarati expression that where should know? Gujarati expression is that when the goddess comes to put a vermilion on your forehead, you excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. Something like that. So he's put colloquialisms in there as well. So I try to bring that flavor of this man.
What was the level of education for Bailey?
He went to school. I think he went to college.
Right?
Yeah, he met at Meherwan and he went to college. And
he did go to college.
Yeah, he did.
But he didn't finish college.
No. So
didn't Meherwan help him too? He went to Meherwan as a friend to help him with his studies.
Yes. But in the book you will see that Baba actually, or rather Meherwan actually coaches someone as a tutor. He becomes a tutor and teaches somebody. And for some time, Baba was a teacher. Then he did a lot of things. In this book, you will see that he was also in theatre. He spent time in theatre and traveled all over the country, performed as a stage manager, things like that. There were several stories like that. Is it okay, Tim? Should I continue?
Asking me.
Yes, you just get a little more time
It's
since we
been
started
recorded.
late, so how about 10 more minutes?
Okay.
10 more minutes, thank you.
Okay. Now this is very interesting. Really, after being told that he has to go to Aden and that he can't get away from it, he has to take on this assignment, comes back returns to Meherban and informs him everything in great detail. After thinking for some time, Meherban says, he was very sad. Meherban was very sad. He says, Bailey, before you leave, you should meet Baba Jan once. Thereafter you may leave. Take my advice and do this last thing for me. Bailey had no love or respect for Baba Jan. On the contrary, to him, she looked like a mad beggar woman in her outer appearance, and he would keep a distance from her. He had no knowledge of her spiritual state. When Meherban used to visit Baba Jan, he used to tease him and make fun of him. And here he was advising Bailey to have Baba Jan's darshan and then leave for Aden. Bailey informed Meherban that he was not interested in meeting Baba Jan. But he insisted and eventually gave in to the advice of his good friend. Bailey's only request was that he would not like to meet her in broad daylight, but in the darkness of the night. He didn't want to be seen with her. He was embarrassed. Meherban did not object to that, and so for the first time Bailey visited this Puna's reverend woman who had achieved such Chit Anand state for her darshan. Baba Jan, this is very interesting, and I enjoyed this. Baba Jan was seated leaning against the trunk of a very old, strong and big tree, in a manner as she was eagerly awaiting his arrival. Only two other people were standing and praying with folded hands. Seeing Bailey standing close to her and hearing him say, Salam Baba Jan, Salam is a way of saying hello, with folded hands, she looked towards him and inquired, Who are you? Where have you come from? As these two questions were asked, the two persons bowed down to her and left the place. Now the two were alone, just as Bailey had wanted. Remembering what Meherban had taught him, Meherban had taught him how to address her. Bailey respectfully replied, I'm your Khaksar Khadim, which means I'm your humble servant. And your son has sent me here. Your son. So, needless to say, Baba Jan always referred to Meherban as Mera Beta, my son. And by no other name and in no other manner. What do you want? Why have you come? She asked. Bailey replied, I have come to seek your permission and your blessings. I am proceeding to Aden. The moment she heard the word Aden come out of his mouth, she was startled as if from her slumber and straightened her back from her drooping posture. Lifting her left fist, she lightly patted her chest twice and uttered, Aden, Aden, softly and steadily.
Right.
After that, she stared intently at his face for 1 or 2 seconds, heaved a sigh, and then said very softly, Okay, go and return after living there for 1.5 years. Very significant. Go and return after 1.5 years. Bailey heaved a sigh of relief that the meeting had come to an end, and quickly joining both hands, bowed to her and returned. Meherwan was waiting for him. Bailey informed him everything in detail about his first ever meeting with Baba Jan. He heard him out without interruption. What can be done, Bailey? This is Meherwan saying. What can be done, Bailey? Whatever is written in your fate, you have to go through. But one thing you did well, you took my advice and met Baba Jan. Because of her blessings, you will return safely. Bailey asked Meherwan the implication of Baba's statement, come after 1.5 years. Meherwan did not respond and ended the conversation. So you can imagine how significant her words were, which many years later Baba reminded. That very night, Bailey left Pune. In Aden, his life took a turn. Soon after his arrival in Aden, an epidemic of influenza broke out there for the very first time. Many of the armed forces fell sick. One after the other, in the various departments and hospitals, 5 agents and storekeepers got ill, and Bailey had to take on additional responsibilities. He was bogged down with work and was running ragged. Just as Bailey's responsibilities increased, so did his income. He was in the prime of youth, just 23 years old, well-built, strong and healthy, with good looks, coupled with pride and arrogance, with plenty of money. He began to believe that God had blessed him to have all the fun in his life. He began to cross all limits, and intoxicated with liquor, disrespected his officers. Before another storekeeper could be recruited, they helplessly tolerated all his whims and bad behavior. He was very arrogant and content in the feeling that even his officers were helpless and could not do anything to him. Finally, the day arrived when one after another storekeepers, clerks, agents, accountants, all other junior staff arrived in one steamer, and Bailey's autocratic behavior took a blow. He was relieved from his additional duties that he had to perform. Once in an inebriated state, Bailey behaved rudely with the commanding officer and gave him an offensive reply. This resulted in an immediate under arrest order passed against him. After a few days, he was court-martialed and an inquiry was started against him in the military court. He was declared guilty and punished to 2 years of rigorous imprisonment. Out of sympathy for him, Aden's General Officer Commander reduced the term by 6 months and made it for 18 months. 1.5 years. Before the inquiry against him commenced, although many of his well-wishers and friends and those who knew him advised him to apologize and express regrets to the officer he had insulted, Bailey remained adamant in his pride and arrogance. And then it goes on how an officer had stayed on for 3 days to help him out, only if he would sign a piece of paper saying that he was sorry, he apologized, but he refused. Then a Parsi lady in Aden who heard of his story, she came, and she was very influential. She came to see him. He said she would see her, but he would not relent. He would not apologize. He would do his 1.5 years imprisonment. Then what happened was that armistice treaty came and they were willing to release him. But he was so arrogant that he says, when my term is finished, only then will I walk out of this prison. Not before that. Even though they said, you're free to walk out. He wouldn't. So here it says over here that after that, even when armistice treaty was declared and Bailey was listed amongst those named for release, he made it known that he did not want to be released under any circumstances until after he had completed his entire term. His name was removed from the list, and only after completing his reduced term of 1.5 years, owing to the remark "good conduct" in jail records, Bailey was released. Then he went straight. He had to stay on for a month because he didn't have a ship to go back to Bombay and Pune. He arrived in Pune, and then Bailey writes as a kind of a footnote, "I now wish to state about my punishment to what Babajan uttered during my very first visit to her. What she said was, 'Stay for 1.5 years and return.' I had completely forgotten these words, and had also forgotten Babajan. Even after my return to Pune, and even though I used to often pass by her seat several times, I never remembered her words to me. After several years, once in Meherabad, when Meher Baba was sitting with a few of his disciples and was reminiscing about the past, referring to Babajan, he asked me, 'Bailey, do you remember what Babajan told you before your departure to Aden?' At that time I recollected her words and said in the affirmative. After that, Baba continued, 'You had even asked me the meaning of stay for 1.5 years and return. I was aware of its meaning and implications, but it would have been of no avail to tell you the truth behind the statement, and it was also not possible for me to tell you that. That's the reason I avoided answering. Now you must have thoroughly understood its meaning, isn't it?' Bailey replied, 'No, till now I had not understood, and neither did I bother to understand, but I understand now. It was a clear sign that I had to undergo the jail term of 1.5 years and return.' So these were the two stories. There's a lot more to it in terms of what happened between Bailey and he was always so very arrogant that he would even tussle with the Basti Maharaj. Yeah. He would sit under a tree and not do anything, and Basti Maharaj said, 'Why are you sitting here and wasting your time?' And so he always had that very arrogant attitude, but that was the role that he played. And none of the Mandli ever liked him. None of the Mandli, especially A.D.K. Rani. So, because he was arrogant, he would say things to Baba he should not be saying. And so, the story of Bailey and his relationship with Baba will appear in this book called God Child.
Great teaser.